Hi, welcome to Viva Voce. I'm Manny Mehta. I'm a vascular surgeon with the Vascular Group at Albany Medical Center. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing my partner, Clem Darling, who's the president of the Vascular Group. Clem, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So Clem, most people know you as a vascular surgeon who runs one of the largest vascular surgery practices in the world, the Vascular Group at Albany Medical Center. I know you personally for many years, but I don't think most people know where you come from and how you got to where you are today. So we would love to hear that story.
I've been privileged to be in vascular surgery for over 40 years now. I started when I was 16, working in an OR and working in a lab. Most people probably know that my father was a well-known vascular surgeon in Boston at Mass General for many years. I tried my hardest not to go into what he did. I did everything I could to avoid it, and somehow I ended up back where I am. But it's really been quite an unusual trip. I've gotten to work with a lot of the major surgeons in vascular surgery and many of the pioneers in vascular surgery, and it's really given me a broad view of where we've come and where we should go.
So let's take this back to, so obviously your father is R. Clem Darling II, very well-known vascular surgeon in Boston for many years, for his whole career. So coming from that lineage, what made you not want to go into vascular, and what was that turnaround that you said, well, you know what, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it well?
It didn't take many years of therapy, I'll tell you, but he was a very hardworking person. He really dedicated his entire life to vascular surgery. He worked through the Harvard system. And in doing so, I never saw him. We really didn't have much of a family life growing up. And as a matter of fact, when I asked him when he took vacations, he told me vacations are when I operate on the people I want to operate on, not the ones I have to operate on. So I think, although all of the kids worked for my father at one point or another, and I was his OR tech for many years before I went to medical school, I wasn't sure if doing a job where, even though I was so consumed and doing such a great job, that I wanted to sacrifice my family. So I tried to look for different options. Now, ironically, I think that background is what made me want to go to Albany and made me want to work in a group where family was as important as surgery or taking care of patients, and that we could realize the future of people enjoying their life as well as being satisfied with doing the best job possible for vascular patients.
So from your vantage point, tell me about the history of vascular surgery that you witnessed.
So my father's first job was with a gentleman named Robert Linton, and the reason I grew up in Boston and lived in Boston is because part of his contract, which he was paid $14,000 a year, was to work within 30 seconds of the hospital. So we always lived within 30 seconds of the hospital. In the old Harvard days, you were hired either for emergencies or for redos, and he was hired for emergencies. So I worked a lot in Boston doing actually more cultural things and staying away from the sciences. And then once when I was 16, I needed a job, and my mother said, why don't you see what's going on with your father? And I joined him and Jeff Rains, whose PhD thesis was the PVR machine. So I worked as a kind of an engineer with Jeff for 2 or 3 years and then became an OR tech. That way I worked with Dr. Linton. I worked with many of the leaders in vascular surgery who came through Mass General to do their fellowship, which was unaccredited at that time, but was more of an apprenticeship. So it's always unusual as a person of 58 years old when people call me Clemmy, because they knew me when I was 16, still within the area. But things have changed, but they really haven't changed in that whole time. We still use the same basic tenets of how we treat patients. What we've improved upon, I think, is the coordination and working together with other specialties for the patient instead of having just ownership of the patient.
So what brought you to Albany?
Duraz Shah brought me to Albany. So oddly enough, in my quest for not going into vascular surgery, I wanted to go into transplant surgery. And it was just, liver transplants were just coming out. And I realized that the big fault with liver transplants is anastomosis. So I was going to do a year of vascular and a year of transplant and then go back to Boston and do transplant surgery. I had the old classical training, which was somewhere between 6 and 8 years. When they let you go when they felt you were ready or they have had enough apprenticeship for you. And so I went out to Albany for my 1 year of vascular. I was going to go back to the Deaconess in Boston to do my liver transplants. And Shaw convinced my wife that it was way smarter for me to stop training and finally make a living. And so I stayed in Albany, thinking I was always going to go back to Boston. But after, I think the environment in Albany, the fact that we could do so many cases, we could take care of so many patients. And ever since we started there, we worked very closely with the interventional radiologists, even though they weren't part of our group. And it was always a very close-knit, cohesive effort of all the physicians in the place that made it a family. And what Shaw did show me is that you can also be a family person as well as an excellent surgeon. So, I think he and I helped create that environment of family is important, and having a good time is important as doing a good job.
So, and living there, I can tell you that that's obviously been working really well for the whole group. So Shah's handed you the baton about 15 years ago, if I have that correct. What do you think is your best or your biggest accomplishment with the group and then in vascular surgery?
With the group, I think it's being able to hold together 19 vascular surgeons with disparate beliefs on what the future should hold, and disparate beliefs of who's doing the most work and who's doing the least work. I think being able to bring everybody together with a singular goal in mind is probably one of my better accomplishments. I think as a group, creating a network, being able to control vascular care for 15 hospitals, and working well with the hospitals, and for the most part, well with the cardiologists, radiologists, family practice people, is the legacy I think our group will leave. That's pretty much what I'm most proud of, I think.
And it has been a lot of work, and I've watched you do it over the last 13 years that I've been at Albany, for sure. Now, you're also very much involved in Society of Vascular Surgery. You've been on the executive committee for well over 5 years, and from my vantage point, in the near future, you will be one of the presidents of the Society of Vascular Surgery. Which direction do you think you would want to take SVS in, and you have been for the past 5+ years of being on the executive committee?
Vascular surgery is a small group, and the Society of Vascular Surgery has 3,500 members, and there are only less than 3,000 board-certified vascular surgeons. But I think as a group, much like our group, we've shown that you can be very powerful if you use logic, you use data, and you always keep the patient's benefit paramount in every decision we make. I think Sean Roddy of our group's done a great job with CMS. I think even if we go into a different paradigm for reimbursement, I think the SVS has positioned vascular surgery in a very positive way. I think we can work better with some of the other specialties, because one of the things we've learned, I think, in the process of working with many hospitals is that the way the healthcare system separates us and the way they make us compete amongst ourselves is really not good for us and not good for the patients. What we have to do in the future is actually learn to work together and learn to do what's best for the patient, not what we feel most comfortable with doing. And I think that's where the SVS needs to lead us in the future. I think we have a great framework for that. I think the contentiousness between societies has gotten much less, and I think the future is working together as a group, a much larger group, and not competing amongst each other, but working with each other.
Now I'm going to save the best question for the last, at least the best from my vantage point, and that is, tell me about your family.
I'm blessed to have a wife of 33 years who's tolerated all my work and difficult lifestyle over
and I can tell. So this is a critical question, and partly because from my vantage point, you have taken the last 15 years or so that I witnessed Albany into a place where you've created an environment that really is a family that work as it is at home. And that's why I asked this question. And I know that there's this incredible lineage of you have 3 children that are doing all sorts of crazy things. And
yep.
Tell us.
My oldest one went to USC Film School and is writes screenplays and plays music and lives between Austin, Texas and Los Angeles. She's actually coming out here on Wednesday to join us. My middle one is working for Mark Schimmelhorn at Deaconess, BI Deaconess now, where I trained, doing research, and actually has, as I told our fellows, more publications than they have right now. And my daughter is in environmental studies out in Pittsburgh, Pomona, as a senior, and she's doing great. As you know, though, specifically with your family, the legacy we leave is our family, and I've learned, even for my father, that family doesn't have to be your genetic family or your biologic family. It's your medical family, your hospital family, your work family, your patients. And I think what we've been able to accomplish is a system where all of those people are treated equally and equally well.
So Clem, I think your contributions to the Vascular Society are far greater than simply the academia behind it. It truly is a pleasure for us at Viva to have you here. I live with you at home, so it's a pleasure for me to have an opportunity to talk to you at Viva Voce.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Clem.